Good morning. I'm Kristin Carlson, and I want to welcome you to the Beyond Average podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs who are building businesses that don't just grow, they scale, transfer, and create real value through the four intangible capitals. So today I am joined with Brian Fieser, co-founder and managing partner at Blue Crab Consulting. So Brian, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kristen.
Awesome. So Brian, can you just share a little bit about your journey and how you came to start Blue Crab Consulting?
Sure. It starts in terms of the entrepreneurial journey significantly earlier. So it's Blue Crab is kind of an evolution of multiple things, but I have an organizational clinical psychologist by background, and one of the first things I realized in the space was as I pursued the clinical background, the worldview for a clinical psychologist, maybe not all clinical psychologists, but a number of individuals, is really about looking at people that are fundamentally in an unhealthy or deficit state and then moving them into a healthy or average state. And so I quickly found that to be a space that was more difficult for me to find an attachment to. And when I found the clinical and moved to a business organizational space, Kristen, one of the things that intrigued me about even your title of the podcast was really around the same worldview. So I moved from a worldview of unhealthy to healthy or deficit to average. And my perspective when I got into the business and organizational space was I got to move from average teams and help them be exceptional. And so whether that be with a small team or a large enterprise system or process, it was moving something that was fundamentally already working or maybe had some tweaks, then moving it to best in class, moving it into a capability that was differentiated. And so that was for me the journey of how to think about my work and myself as I engage in work. And the entrepreneurial space really evolved from that in terms of working with systems and processes and people. And particularly Blue Crab was a space that we started in 2020, my co-partner Hendrik and I. And it was really focused out of the last 15 years prior to that, we had been in the HR technology space, had exited that space and looking to do something new again. And we really focused on the HR tech domain, not doing kind of some of the legacy work, but really focused on emerging AI technologies and AI technologies that were focused in the human capital domain, focused on, 6 years ago, this was prior to ChatGPT being a common tabletop conversation for homes. So we were in a brand new to world space for the technology and particularly technology AI as it applies to HR. And so we got to do some very fun stuff in the first few years of just educating clients around how AI works, how it works in the workplace, how it works in their particular domain. And eventually, it is the topic for clients now, and a whole lot more sophistication in our users and our administrators and our buyers around what it looks like. And kind of been through that journey for the last 6 years of moving from new to world to really mass adoption of AI capabilities. So that was really a legacy of HR technology that really in 2020 focused on the application of AI, emerging AI technologies.
And is there a tie between the technologies and the work you're doing with building those leaders in organizations? Is there
Well, I think, my
connection?
my journey within Blue Crab is really around driving system and process changes. So system adoption, system implementation, system adoption, and the corresponding business process. Now, I will tell you, I think the journey for the last 6 years, the leadership as stakeholders, not just in terms of process changes or in terms of system adoption, those have been relatively consistent for the duration of the work we do in large scale system applications. The change for leaders, especially HR leaders in the last few years, has been assisting them on the journey of navigating a net new capability in terms of how it affects the workforce, how it affects the nature of work in their teams. But this interesting space that over the last few years, internal responsible AI has become an internal organizational gatekeeper and process. And for our HR leaders that we partner with, it is something that it's brand new to them. They're not sure exactly how to navigate it. And so it is almost as if we are guiding them and helping them through their internal gates around an RAI capability that they haven't had to move before. And so it's really partnering with them, talking about understanding who those stakeholders are internally for them, understanding what the use cases, the expectations around how the AI is going to be applied. But it is for most of our HR leaders, it is brand new. And for their entire careers, they've never had to navigate it.
Right. And is it tie into their change management for their company then too, of how they can increase the adoption of the changes that you're bringing?
So the changes, I think, in many ways, the most successful clients are ones that are thinking about it in transformational capability versus simply an efficiency capability. And so the transformational work is fundamentally moving individuals into a new way of working. And that is explicitly aligned to how much and in what ways organizations want to adopt the capabilities of the AI tools. And so some are much more advanced, some are going to be basic, some will involve data sets, some will involve just chat capabilities. And so how and in what ways they choose to either be very conservative or much more aggressive will also depend upon what the nature of the transformation is. And for them partnering with their AI mandates. Like some of them have organizational cultures that are much more conservative in nature, and therefore they're gonna very much walk into that space. And others are leading edge. They're wanting to engage in the most advanced capabilities to transform their workforce and be early adopters in the space. And they're also in many ways learning as they go, willing to maybe make a misstep and course correct very quickly.
Awesome. So, how big is Blue Crab Consulting?
We are slightly under 50. We're under a $50 million revenue business, but we are really focused in the space of driving um, large scale enterprise clients. And so the work we do is highly niched, but it's also it's not typically we don't typically engage with mid market or commercial clients. We're engaged with large scale global enterprises that are really looking at large scale system design.
Okay. And leading your company, I'm looking for like how big is your team and are you applying some of those things that you studied, with building an organization?
Yeah. So Chris, it's so funny. I was, just taking some notes down to prepare for our conversation, and just about team and style. And as I think about the work we've done, and as I think of like when we first started the entrepreneurial journey of the HR technology, I started as a very early adopter of large scale HR systems with SuccessFactors, which is an SAP platform now. And at the time, we were one of the first three partners in the ecosystem to work with SuccessFactors.
Wow.
And it was brand new to the world. It was the very beginning of SaaS-based content. It was the adoption of a SaaS-based application that could plug into all of the on-prem tools that were in place at the time. And for me, when I was thinking about building a team to do that work, we got to. I started from scratch. This was in 2005, and we built a remote-based company in 2005, well before everyone thought remote work was possible with the advent of COVID. But we were building a completely remote-based company, mostly in North America, some offshore capabilities. But I had this fantastic opportunity to take these consultants that had been road warriors, had been on the road for
Yeah.
4 days a week for most of their careers, and I got to say, we're gonna flip the environment for you. We're gonna do 80% on at your home office, 20% on the road, which was a complete inverse of what they had done. And so it was just such a great opportunity for me to get highly talented, qualified people in a value proposition. So for years, Kristen, I got to create what I would call a world-class team of highly experienced consultants. And one of the major value propositions, quite honestly, is I could take from the big five because they wanted to get off the road. And
Right.
the large consulting groups were still in an on-site client model. And so we purposely hired in a space that was mid-career or better experienced team. Um, and one of the nuances as I was thinking about this is we typically have not had a hiring model that is uh, right out of college grads or young professionals that are still kind of getting their experiences right out of school. And the reason is, I think very early because I had this experience of hiring seasoned professionals, and then I got to create a team in which we didn't have to train and onboard the seasoned professionals to a lot of the kind of fundamental skill sets. They brought those to the table as hiring assets. Um, and so today, the one of the governing philosophies I have really is around self-driven, autonomous capabilities of the individuals on the team, but also because of the nature of the work we do around the technology changes, whether it's a monthly release or it's a quarterly release, semi-annual release, there is a learning curve, which is they have to be motivated to learn the new capability every time it comes out. And so there's this not just self-driven and some autonomy to do that, but there's this nature of what I have called learning agility, which is effectively being successful in new and first time situations. And so it is a piece that I've continued to look at in terms of hiring, of culture, but it is the combination of learning agility in the space of something that continues to change every quarter, every 6 months. There's fundamental changes to what they need to know as experts.
And have you been able to keep that 20% travel to that? I mean, is that like a standard for your
Oh,
company?
it is. This was back. The 80/20 was probably we ran that model up until COVID, and then COVID completely pulled that back. And I'm not sure for the majority of our team if they even travel 20% now. And clients have significantly reduced their travel budgets. They have significantly reduced the on-site demands. It's come back, excuse me, it's come back from where we were 100% remote for a couple of years. And now we have clients that are wanting to engage in kickoffs or testing cycles that are on site. But I would say most of our team probably travels less than 20%.
And how do you keep that remote team engaged, or do they collaborate with each other? Is that a requirement for what they do?
Uh, it is. I would suggest when we did this work before COVID, the tools were not as the organizational tools that we had access to were not as effective as they are today. So I think COVID had this exceptional innovation piece for remote work that we've benefited from,
Right.
whether it's communication channels, collaboration tools. Um, we were doing it before, and it was a little bit harder because the technology didn't support the ease at which we can do it today. But there is clearly mechanisms for the group to drive online collaboration, system collaboration. The teams get some opportunity to work in place, but those are typically on the limited times we're on site at a client environment. That's the most frequent time they're working together in person. But the remote space is pretty. I just compare it to pre-COVID. It was a little bit harder, and it's actually an
Right.
easier capability today, given the nature of what we have. Kristen, so we have this. All of our remote meeting pieces today have backgrounds that you can blur, that you can enter a new automatic background. You have the all kinds of things to make it easier to be on camera. But when we started this, and we probably over the years worked with six different online meeting tools, all of them facilitating some way. And I used to have an onboarding piece for our team, which was how to set up your camera, what your background needed to look like, what your lighting needed to look like, and the rules for being on camera and the space that you had as part of it was part of the onboarding. Today, I don't have any of that as part of a new hire onboarding because everyone's just accustomed to being in a remote on camera setting.
Okay. Do you ever get the whole team together? I mean, do you guys see each other in person or?
Okay, I have in the past done all company meetings in person. We have not done that in the last few years relative to Blue Crab, but it is something that I think drives, at the right times, it drives a good amount of collaboration. It drives the right focus for organizational strategy. And there's an intangible piece around just seeing people in person.
I agree. I agree. I do appreciate working remote, and COVID did provide that for me too. But I do think getting in person is also that additional connection that people can have with each other.
Yeah.
So, Brian, could you just share, if you were going to give some advice to an entrepreneur starting in the tech space, especially the AI space today, where it seems everyone's in that space? I mean, do you have any advice you would give someone?
I don't know if it's necessarily in tech or AI, but in general, I believe there is still an opportunity to be an expert in what you do and be a deep expert. And whether that's a founder or a consultant in the space that eventually moves into some type of independent work, being one of the best people in the world at what you do is always a focus. And so as I think about the spaces we have entered, they are traditionally new to world when we've entered them to create a capability around deep expertise in a thing. Um, and as I think about whether it applies to technology or anything else, if you are exceptionally good at what you do, you create value that is differentiated from anybody else who does the same thing.
Awesome.
So that for me, I often am in awe sometimes of our team members because we have team members that are potentially one of 5 or 10 people in the world that do what they do. And it's highly niched and it's a deep level of expertise, but it is something that I don't know if everyone recognizes the fact that at some point when you're doing something new to world, it takes time for that expertise to be developed in a global sense or even an industry perspective. And so diving in is another way of creating value that is hard to replicate because it also takes time and times, and I'll call it times at bat. You have to have multiple client experiences in that space to also develop the expertise.
Right. Awesome. And is there a secret sauce to keeping your team members?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's a secret sauce. I used to be concerned. I've been an entrepreneur owner for 20 years at this point through a couple of different startups, and I have a different perspective today than I did 15 years ago. And I want to create an environment that people are excited about being in, that provides value to them individually, and that value differs from person to person. But I have an experience now that at some point in somebody's own journey, we're not always the best fit. And that can change over time. Like it may be that when they joined, it was the right fit for what they needed and the right fit for us. And over the course of years with us, that their individual journey and our organizational journey may diverge. And so I am not as hung up around the movement of people in and out of the organization as I used to be. I am always concerned about it being for the right decisions and
Mhm.
not self-inflicted damage that we might be doing organizationally, right? Because that has a much more significant impact. But if individuals are moving in and out for the right reasons, some of which we can control, some of which we cannot, but it's also a recognition of humanity. Like people have these massive, important lives, and we're not always the most important thing in it, and they need to make those decisions for themselves and their families.
Awesome. What a great leadership lesson. I totally agree with you, right? And being able to let people go if that's the right path for you or for them, right? That's others will rise to the occasion, right? So,
I do, and I also feel like I'm in such it's a large global world of the space we're in, but it's also small.
mhm.
And so whether they are rejoiners at some other point in their life, or if they are engaged in another institution that's a better fit for them at the time, I also fundamentally I hope my team members feel this. I think they do, and I know for the most part the people who have left have felt this. if I am an advocate for them in their own growth and development and their own journeys as the first premise, it it it, it brings about the right decisions because it is something that they can be engaged with our team, they can be engaged somewhere else, and if I'm still a champion for their own journeys, I think it's building a set of relationships and expectations, and that come back in the moment and come back years later.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing today, Brian, your journey and just your leadership strength for your organization. And we're grateful that you joined us today.
Yeah, well, Kristen, thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you.